Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about today, of course, marks the 3rd anniversary of the Operation Swift Retort and the way Pakistan responded to aggression from India, which is unparalleled. Also, the way that the Indian pilot Abhinandan was captured and the way that Pakistan treated him was also returned. All of that is unparalleled, perhaps in the sense that Pakistan showed resolve, it showed unquestioning integrity in the way that the pilot was returned. The ramifications of which are present even today. We'll talk about our territorial integrity, sovereignty, which we have always maintained. We have always said that while we believe in peace, we believe in solution through dialogue, we are fully capable of keeping ourselves safe, keeping our country safe. Something the Prime Minister again reiterated today when he said that as far as conflict resolution is concerned, he believes that the solution is through dialogue, the solution is through diplomacy. But of course, Pakistan is prepared at all times to defend its territorial integrity, defend its borders from any and all kinds of aggression. Today I have with me AVM retired Ikramullah Bhatti, who is a senior analyst. Thank you for joining us today. We also have with us AVM retired Ijaz Malik, who is a defense analyst. Thank you for being with us. Ikramullah sab, as far as overall the situation, the events of that day are concerned, how do you see the way that things happened that day, Pakistan handled itself, and history, the way now, if we look back, how we look back at those events of 2019 again, and the way we need even today need to commemorate them, perhaps. It certainly was a proud moment for Pakistan and continues to be till today also. Because we don't get that kind of examples from across the border, certainly also not many from other nations also around the world.
Well, this has been building for a while, because we have seen that for the last couple of years in the Indian politics, a recipe had been found to be successful and useful by the Indian politicians, especially the current leadership, that bashing Pakistan did give them dividends, and somehow they had been able to develop this flavor or taste in the Indian public, that anyone who bashes Pakistan is patriotic, is brave, and hence qualifies to be a leader within India. And that is why we saw that whenever the elections used to be at hand, the Indian leaders would start to use this as a card to win votes. And Pakistan has been aware of this, that Indians could undertake such an adventure, and Pakistan was prepared for it. Pakistan had been training for it, and the Pakistan Air Force was ready, that whenever such a situation arises within India, there is a possibility that they could undertake such a misadventure. And lo and behold, on the 14th of February, they did stage a false flag operation on the 14th of February, and thereafter they became the investigator themselves, the judge and the executioner, whereas Pakistan had repeatedly offered that we would like to
right, I want to come to that. Pakistan did offer, like you are saying, we wanted there to be independent investigation, and to obviously satisfy India as diplomatically we should have done. But of course, there's always the answer is in aggression as far as India is concerned. But overall, after the events of what happened and the way Pakistan retaliated, I think it continues to be a cause of embarrassment for India even today.
Certainly, because you see, India being a much larger country undertakes such an operation after declaring that it is wanting to punish Pakistan and gets a bloody nose in return, and that's a huge embarrassment. And in fact, they had to resort to declare that the Indian pilot had in fact shot down a Pakistani aircraft before he was shot down, And
so there was like a lot, of course, there are a lot of lies, there's a lot of, blatant lies, a lot of building up of narratives, which is not new as far as from across the border. I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to AVM retired Ijaz Malik Sahab. Ji, Ijaz Sahab, I hope you've been following the conversation with Ikramullah Bhatti Sahab, and we've been talking about India and the aggression that invariably is the answer from across the border. But the way that what it was met by in terms of, even internationally, we saw all over the world, the world commemorate, the world respond to the way the pilot Abhinandan was returned, the way he was treated following the Geneva Conventions, all of those things. Pakistan came out in a new light and, much maturer, wanting to be, of course, being seen as an advocate of true peace, wanting to be, which we've been wanting to be seen as, we've been consistently trying to convince India of that narrative, proof of which is what the Prime Minister even said today.
Yes, indeed, it reflected in a very precise manner the resolve of our political leadership that yes, we want peace, we want dialogue, but it shouldn't be taken as our weakness. And should a situation come, our military muscle is strong enough to respond in a manner that we did on 27th of February. If you recall, Prime Minister had very clearly and very candidly, declared that we would respond, we would retaliate, and we would retaliate in a manner that is befitting. So, at operational level, Pakistan Air Force reacted, very responsibly, showing their competence.
Do you think that as far as India is concerned, do you think that there was an underestimation? They underestimated Pakistan in a big way after they instituted this attack. They weren't expecting Pakistan to retaliate the way they did, and like I said, it continues to be a cause of embarrassment for them.
Definitely, but as you mentioned in your intro, that they tried to get out of this very embarrassing and internationally awkward situation for them with their narrative and counter narrative based on lies and multiple lies. And ultimately what happened, that word I've seen, that ultimately they were trying to award a kill which was never there, which was, internationally, the neutral sources, they all, very well confirmed that there hasn't been any aircraft shot down from Pakistani side, but they were, commending their pilot for that, and ultimately they ended up giving him a gallantry award for something that which he hasn't done. So that's the kind of narrative as Air Marshal Bhatti had just very aptly highlighted, that it is the use of their military application for political gain and to satisfy their vote bank and to satisfy those extremist elements within the government as well as
and trying to save face, of course, when they're giving awards of this kind, of course, and building that kind of narrative, essentially to give it that false image, trying to sustain it. And I think Ikramullah Sahab, I will come back to you. Ikramullah Sahab, you were also talking about the fact that overall, as far as the Indian government is concerned, they've managed to sell this narrative, the anti-Pakistan narrative, in a big way. Of course, it's also led to more extremism in India. It's also led to, less freedom of religion, persecution of minorities, all of those things. But that doesn't seem to be of much concern at this time to the government, Modi's government in India.
Well, it's unfortunate that somehow this narrative has had its success because the Modi government came back into power with a bigger majority, and which in fact convinced them that yes, this narrative works and it has its own dividends. But the tragedy is now we find that the minorities in India are in a much worse situation. There is public lynching taking place, and there are Muslims and Christians and other low caste Hindus being hounded within India, and there is open declaration of conducting genocide against Muslims especially. And the world is taking notice of this, and I think this is going to put India under very severe limelight, and there is going to be a lot of unrest within India, which is going to lead to a very serious divide within the country. And unfortunately, the leadership, the current leadership in India is not realizing this. And while the world is pointing this out, and there are increasing voices within India, and there is increasing unrest, and we can just hope and pray that they get wiser to this, and they abandon this, and they change this policy, because this is going to ruin India internally.
And also the region, in terms of how inflammatory it is, not only just for the region, but also within India. And the fact that, of course, it can lead to more fragmentation, breakage within India, where when we talk about minorities, and, certainly we say that Muslims are a minority, but it's by no means a small minority. It's a huge number of people and their religious freedom. Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Ijaz Sahab. Ijaz Sahab, overall, the capability of our Air Force. Can you take us, of course, we saw that India had underestimated our capability to respond that in a big way. But as far as our capability is concerned, as far as, there's a lot being said, as far as Indian capability, their Air Force, their capability, their arsenals, their, their fighter aircrafts, all of those things versus what we have. How do you see that at this time? How do you see our overall capability at this time? Where do we stand, in your opinion?
Okay, I would just like to give you a bit of historical perspective of how the two air forces evolved since partition. While their side, their reliance has more been on numbers because of their larger size of economy, readily available equipment sourcing for them. But on our side, our founding fathers, they had focused on professionalism, training, and then based on our skill sets and supported by the conviction that here we are, ready 24/7 with that highest level of operational readiness, we are ready to safeguard the aerial frontiers of our motherland. So we have shown this capability, time over time, multiple times. Once, even back in 1950, as early as 1959, Indian Canberra came over Pakistan airspace on a Eid day, assuming that probably Pakistanis would be celebrating their religious festival, and it was on a reconnaissance mission. And then it was detected in time by our air defense system. We scrambled, and our aircraft, which had a slightly lesser operational ceiling to intercept that high altitude reconnaissance air Canberra, we shot down that aircraft. So it was being controlled by a young pilot officer.
It's also said that it's not. Of course, it's important to have the right assistance in terms of all kinds of technical assistance in terms of fighter jets and all other arsenal, which certainly Pakistan doesn't lack. But it's also the man behind the machine, right?
Yes, actually, the kind of threat spectrum we have, we don't have any choice. We have to train ourselves. We have to employ ourselves in a manner that we generate a very potent response to any awkward situation. But I was trying to highlight that our air defense system over the years have developed into such a formidable force with our state-of-the-art surveillance system, response from our air as well as ground sensors in terms of detection, and a very potent aircraft which are available to us for interceptions, and training of the controllers, pilot teams, which are performing their exercises, which are rehearsing different scenarios and response options. It was proved on that day once we intercepted Abhinandan's aircraft.
Right, let me come back to you. Ji, AVM Akramullah, overall, this in terms of exposing India, certainly this whole operation, the way that it happened, it exposed India, there's no doubt about that. But in terms of the way that Pakistan handled, I want to talk a little bit more about that. The way that we apprehended the pilot Abhinandan, the way he was returned, the dignified manner in which Pakistan treated him. All of those things are also an example in its own.
Certainly, when Abhinandan bailed out in Pakistani territory, he was armed, and he was initially apprehended by villagers, and he tried to create a confusion as if he is a Pakistani and not an Indian. And then he of course took out his gun and he fired also. But then of course the villagers overpowered him, and they of course they roughed him up a bit. But very soon the personnel from Pakistani army reached over there, and they rescued him, and then they took care of him. They treated him well, they kept him well, and he was treated absolutely according to the Geneva Convention rules, and of course he was a high-ranking officer, so he got a very good treatment, and of course the famous statement by him that the tea is fantastic, and of course we realized that it's pointless keeping him any longer, and within 2 days he was returned back to India, and as you said, this gesture or this move by Pakistan was acknowledged and appreciated the world over, that in the interest of good relations, in the interest of peace in the region, and Pakistan has not only treated him well but also returned him very quickly.
And we did, knowing that were the events the other way around, we would probably have not had that kind of reaction from across the border.
Certainly.
Knowing that they would probably not have returned, God forbid, if we had, our pilot had crossed there.
Of course.
And those.
And if you allow me, may I add something to your
please.
previous question which you asked my colleague regarding the power or the strength of the two air forces. I think it was very clearly and amply acknowledged by the Indian Prime Minister, because after the incident, he publicly stated that if India had Rafale aircraft, the result would have been different.
Okay.
That means he straight away acknowledged the weakness of his air force. And then of course there were reports the very next day that Indians are attempting to mobilize their missiles. That means the Indian leadership had clearly expressed their lack of faith and confidence in their air force, and now they are resorting to another set of weapons, which clearly indicated the faith that the leadership had in the strength or the capability of the Indian Air Force, and vis-a-vis Pakistan Air Force, and also it was an acknowledgement of the strength of Pakistan Air Force. That
and also as far as our own, like you're saying, our own capabilities are concerned, we didn't want to retaliate. We don't want to. We always keep on saying, and the Prime Minister said today also, he talked about diplomacy, he talked about the fact that there's only one solution, and that is through talk, through diplomacy, through peace. And he remains an advocate of that peace. Pakistan has also consistently said so. But that doesn't in any way mean that we don't have the capability necessary to safeguard our own territorial sovereignty, our own parameters.
You see, interestingly, as per the international laws of conflict, Pakistan was entitled for only a proportionate response. And the Indian Air Force, despite having dropped 4 Spice 2000 bombs, was not able to cause much damage except destroy a few trees and kill a crow. And Pakistan had to think through as to what should be a proportionate response, because that response had to indicate, clearly declare the capability of Pakistan and the intent of Pakistan. That not only that we are capable, we also have the intention to use that capability to demonstrate to India that we will just not think of retaliation, but we will retaliate. So that is why we had to make a very calculated response, which conveys our capability as our intent, and that is why we targeted 6 places, and we made sure that there are no casualties on ground, there is no destruction caused, but Pakistan clearly demonstrates its capability and intention.
Right. Let me come back to you. We also have with us Fahad Masood, who's squadron leader, former pilot, PAFG. Fahad Sahab, overall, in terms of the events of 3 years ago, we're talking about what it meant for Pakistan, the way that Pakistan acted, the way that we responded to Indian aggression, all of those things. As a pilot, in terms of our own capabilities, in terms of our technical expertise, our technical capability, in terms of our airplanes are concerned, fighter jets are concerned, all of those things are concerned, versus what India has. How would you, balance it? How would you explain it? How would you rate it?
Well, let's take it from an historical perspective. Since 65 till date, specifically 2019, there has not been any face-to-face conflict between the two air forces. We had shown our prowess back in 65 and 71 in the air battle domain, and we held our own in this 2019 skirmish as well. What is of consequence is that we gained parity and with the Indian Air Force, which is quantifiably more in number. The other aspect that is of importance in this whole domain or time frame of 27th Feb is the different air-powered arenas that were utilized. If we go specifically from air to ground weapon delivery to EW, which is electronic warfare, to airborne early warning radar systems, to air-to-air combat. So it's more of a team effort, as a lot of people have talked of before. But if we look at the domains, there is no greater that was utilized. ISR platforms were there, information surveillance reconnaissance, we had eyes in the skies. So they were truly bamboozled at that point in time. Once we dropped our air to surface standoff weapons, then as soon as they retaliated, they were in a state of daze because of our EW capability. They were not able to see nor hear their own radar systems. Hence, the Mi-17 fratricide that they did on their own helicopter. So, looking at parity and where it counts is where we did well. If we are looking at the regional scenario or the situation, they have had a bloody nose, as we call it. And in the big picture of things, they know that they've been had. The international air forces know that they have, the Indians have lost 2 aircrafts, 3 to be very exact, including the Mi-17. And if they want to go Bollywood on it, that's a separate story. But in the heart of heart, they also know that they have been given a punch by an air force which is synergistically working together as a team. So, long story short, it's hard times for the...
you, Fahad, please stay with us. Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Ijaz Malik Saab. Ji, Ijaz Saab, overall, when you, I think an interesting term that Fahad used when he said that, go Bollywood on the whole, on the way that it happened, the operation and all of that. Overall, the way that when you spin narratives or when you try to sort of save face, which is what seems to have been the only option India had with the way the events of that day, how would you rate the kind of lies, the kind of narrative that was thrown forward, certainly seems, of course, unbelievable. The way that they tried to, like, we were earlier talking about award their pilot, all of those things.
I think they tried their bit, but unfortunately, this time around, they couldn't take the desired outcome out of all that investment that they had done in terms of media management. And I think Pakistan Air Force did very well on this count also, because in the debrief to the mission that we conducted, it was made public. The statement of our Air Chief and Deputy Chief of the Air Staff Operations that was shared with the media, and even the shots in which the scene shots of the shooting down of the aircraft and our engagement with standoff weapon on the Indian side, those acquisition of the target, all those things, they were shown with a credible proof. And we challenged India that they can come themselves, or they can seek and third-party review of our claims, but they never came back to contest that. All said and done, it was very clearly registered in all concerned quarters globally that this time around, Indian Air Force and Indian political leadership, they failed to create or sell what they always try to do with their false flag operations, or the narrative of surgical strikes that they are very fond of mentioning very frequently.
Let me come back to you. AVM Ikramullah, overall, in terms of capability, can you take us, in your experience, how, as far as upgrading is concerned, as far as, of course, we acknowledge whatever resources we have, and, our forces that are at our disposal across the board, as far as Air Force is concerned, particularly. But in terms of upgradation of our arsenal, our, all the technical assistance that we need, our airplanes, all of those things, how often does it happen? Does it happen consistently? What kind? Can you take us through a little bit of the procedural aspect of it?
Well, you see, you have to identify your enemy. You have to identify your enemy's strength and the way the enemy is going to use its capability. And based on that, you develop a response, and that response ought to be based on certain capability which you need to develop, if not acquire and then develop. And then you need to train to be able to use that capability to achieve that effect.
Right.
And this is an unending, ongoing process around the year.
Okay.
And Pakistan Air Force, of course, identifies the Indian Air Force as the main enemy. And the Indian Air Force remains under the microscope always. And what is their capability, how are they using it, what could be their plans, what could they do. And based on that, of course, we develop a counter strategy, and which, of course, helps us in identifying capabilities which we must develop or we must acquire, and then we need to train to be able to use that capability effectively against the enemy. And what could be the scenarios.
And we remain ready, of course, to respond at all times.
Absolutely, absolutely ready. And training round the year, so that as and when an eventuality develops, we are prepared and we are able to meet that challenge and, of course, deliver our punch.
Right. Fahad, overall, in terms of, your training is concerned, I've been asking AVM Ikramullah also, but as a fighter pilot, the rigors of that training and being ready to respond at all times, which is, keeping our preparation level to that extent, all of those things. As a pilot, can you maybe take us through a little bit of that?
Yes, absolutely. If we start off from the whole scenario build up, it generates or it is generated from the strategic onset. There is a threat perception that is understood by the strategic tier, which is the top tier of the organization, and then it broils down to the operations and then to the tactical tier. And tactical tier is where the hands are literally gotten, they get dirty in training. So training is as real as possible, as it is infamously said. If, the more you, let me correct this, the more you prepare in case of peace, the better you will fight in war. So,
Okay.
as realistic scenarios come, they are practiced, imagined, and executed in trainings. If we look at the build-up of a fighter pilot from the academy to the epitome where the person reaches or the fighter pilot reaches the CCS or the combat commander school at Sargodha, the it's a gradual block building, known to unknown, easy to difficult approach. The three domains, which is cognitive, psychomotor, and emotional, all three are catered for. The best of the best are made to reach weapon systems which are more important or require greater switch tasking capability. So,
Okay.
all said and done, it is a challenge that every individual who makes it to the stream takes head on. And there are no points for second place other than the fact that we are all on the same team once we are back on the ground. So, air to air, once we're in the domain of air combat or air to ground weapon delivery, both sides are important, but the important aspect that is left here is the overall big picture understanding, which is taken at the strategic scale and worked down to the tactical level.
Oh, okay, thank you so much for taking us through that. G, Ijaz Sahab, as far as diplomacy is concerned, we talk about our swift response. We talk about the fact that we remain committed to peace as far as our diplomacy is concerned. But the narrative that India has been consistently putting forward now, if we talk about the Pulwama attack, we talk about the Uri attack, we talk about, without a shred of evidence, which the world also saw, the spin, the targeting of Pakistan, which is not new, which is what invariably happens from across the border. Even with the kind of response that we gave, that remains consistent overall. How would you rate Pakistan's response? Even if we don't talk about the military response, militarily where we are, certainly we're fully capable of handling it, which is what we proved. But overall, in terms of reaction, rather than reactionary kind of behavior, of course, when we've had to prove that we have the requisite capability, we did so. But we remain rational. We remain committed to peace. How would you agree with that?
Before I answer your question, allow me to add to your previous question, in which my colleagues, they were discussing about our progressive and ongoing peacetime training processes through which a fighter pilot or our combat teams they go through. And the advantage of all these mechanism, training mechanism, the training curriculum which is placed within the fighter squadrons and the air defense units, and then the teams that they employ together in the near realistic scenario. The icing on cake, I would say, were the two in the previous generation. Our pilots and air defense system, they were exposed during early 80s to actual war on our western border. We had number of kills to then the Soviet aircraft which were operating from Afghanistan at that time. And then in the recent conflict post 9/11, our Air Force has been on a highest state of alert, and our pilots, they got an opportunity to operate those platforms at the optimum level in actual scenarios while we were conducting our operations in war against terror. So this particular aspect, probably India could not realistically war game that what is the mastery level of a person in the cockpit to accrue best out of the equipment that is being employed up in the air in any conflict. Now coming back to your question, which you directly asked me, actually after we both went nuclear, Pakistan's stance at national level has been, or international level, but we have been portraying that there is no space for a war between two nuclear armed states, and we should resolve all conflicts, and primarily, the major, conflict is of Kashmir through peaceful composite dialogue. But this is India who try time and again to portray their philosophy that there still exists some place to engage in a conflict below the threshold of the two nuclear armed states. Whereas Pakistan always tries to act after having gained a very potent nuclear capability. Pakistan always tries to execute their diplomatic as well as their international relations with all countries in a manner which are befitting to a responsible state. So that is the difference. We are not a belligerent state like the extremist leadership in India now portrays.
Right, let me come back to you. Ikramullah Sahab, overall, when we look at the responsibility to not, ignite the situation, considering, our region and considering the fact that both Pakistan and India are nuclear states, that responsibility certainly, is not to be shouldered single-handedly by Pakistan. It should certainly be reciprocated from across the border, which it is not. And we've seen consistently our leadership, whether we talk about the armed forces, whether we talk about the, air forces, all our forces, the Prime Minister, categorically reiterate that again and again. But what do you see now in the immediate future as far as, our relationship with India is concerned? Do you think, because, there have been moments in history where Pakistan has made a lot of effort to try to have a better relationship with our neighbor. We've tried to promote dialogue even over Kashmir again and again, as far as the UN is concerned, as far as, other international platforms are concerned. But that's consistently been rebuked. And we haven't had the kind of response that we should have had. In that kind of scenario, developing in India at this time, in terms of aggression, in terms of, overall, it seems to be that India is burning the way that minorities are being treated. What do you foresee?
Well, you see, India has always thought of undoing Pakistan, because we still remember the slogan Akhand Bharat, and until I think the visit of Vajpayee to Lahore, Indians had not accepted Pakistan as a reality, as an independent country, and Vajpayee's visit to Minar-e-Pakistan was in fact criticized in India as that it is like accepting Pakistan, which clearly indicated that till then India had not accepted the existence of Pakistan. And when we talk of 27th February incident, I think that clearly re-established or reiterated the conventional deterrence of Pakistan vis-a-vis India, whereas we already had the nuclear deterrence. And I think the Indians over there, I would say, acted wisely, and after Pakistan's retaliation, they did not respond. And the whole incident or the event stopped right there.
Because they realized that probably, they'd underestimated Pakistan.
Yes.
They didn't have the kind
and
of
they didn't want to
capability.
escalate it any further.
Right.
So that means they accepted Pakistan's conventional as well as nuclear deterrence. But now that we see that India has acquired S-400 missiles, they have acquired Rafale combat aircraft, and they have already deployed the missiles close to Pakistan's border. And they, of course, they are operationalizing the Rafale aircraft. So I think the moment the Indians once again realize that they are in a position to take on Pakistan, I think we will have to be watchful and careful. That is the reason that why Pakistan is now acquiring new aircraft from China. So I think as far as India is concerned, Pakistan will have to be watchful and careful throughout. And we'll have to make sure that we always maintain a deterrence, a capability which the Indians realize and they respect. And they do not get into an adventure like they did it on the 14th of February 2019. This is a lesson that Pakistan has learned from there, that we will have to
be ready at all time.
Yes.
Right. Ji, Fahad, would you add to that as far as our pilots are concerned? Certainly, we've been talking about, you've been telling us as far as training is concerned, certainly the rigors of training and knowing that, our pilots, our forces have to be ready at all times for any kind of adventure, as AVM Ikramullah termed it, from the other side. Whenever they miscalculate that they are prepared to take Pakistan on. All of those things, regardless of how much we want there to be peaceful solution, how much we want there to be a neighbor, that can coexist peacefully, it seems to be on the cards, right?
Yes, it is absolutely. We need to maintain our conventional capability, because we all understand that the nuclear threshold is something that neither us nor our eastern adversary would like to breach. Where we can improve this, and we have done this, and we are continuing to do this through exercises within our neighboring countries. For example, Shaheen, series of exercises with China. We've had a stream with Saudi Arabia as well, and we continue to evolve our tactics as well as strategies. Once we are able to, as I mentioned before, we had clarity of threat perception. That is where we build our tactics and in turn our belief systems. So if we are looking at the eastern border, they came up with this paradigm of cold start doctrine, which was directly taken care of by the military or the Pakistani Air Force by making a new air base in the heart of the country, dead center, which is Jacobabad. So we are, as a leadership, ready for any eventuality, and we continue to build. If we look at the present time, where, as AVM Ikram specifically mentioned, the Rafael platform, the present air chief as well as the air staff are cognizant of the development. And we've come up with a solution as a light in day with the J10 platform, which is supposed to come across before 23rd March in Pakistan Air Force and re-establish first shot capability. If we look at the arsenal of the Rafael, which is the Meteor air-to-air BVR, with on our side the PL-15, which is the longer stick, as they call it, and greater ranges. But as I believe we have had a conversation before on this, and I have iterated this as well, what matters more is the man behind the gun, but not the gun. So in our domain, the professionalism that is required to sustain prowess over one's own weapon system, to ensure that the missions that are detailed are achieved in true letter and spirit. So that is key. And if we continue to evolve, become better, ensure that the military force or the military arm or the Pakistan Air Force is an instrument of policy and statecraft, we will continue to prevail. And in the big picture of the subcontinent as well as the world, we will continue to hold our own in domains of air power employment and doctrine.
Right. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm just going to take Ijaz Malik Saab's quick comments. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Ji, Ijaz Saab.
Yes, I will tend to agree that while we have to maintain a credible deterrence, but in the parallel, we have to continue to maintain and in fact upgrade as and when required our conventional capability. And it is not only the acquisition, but how we assimilate the new technologies and the new weapon systems. And I think we have a very, glorious past and legacy of acquiring and then gaining mastery over various platforms throughout our history.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us. AVM retired Ikramullah Bhatti, thank you for joining us. Fahad Masood, thank you for being with us. AVM retired Ijaz Malik, thank you for joining us. Certainly, Pakistan has, the Prime Minister has reiterated that Pakistan remains committed to peace. It remains committed to ensuring that there are solutions through diplomacy. There are diplomatic solutions. There are solutions through dialogue. But at the same time, we fully are cognizant of the fact that and able to defend our borders at all times. And India should, of course, take cognizance of that. All our neighbors should know that Pakistan is certainly capable of defending its territorial integrity, its territorial sovereignty. Thank you so much for being with us today on Perspective.